The womb of stars embraces us. Remnants of their fiery furnace pulse through our veins. We are of the earth. We breathe and live in the breath of ancient plants and beasts and people. Their cells nourish the soil. We build our communities on the harvest of gifts. Our fingers trace the curves carved in clay and stone by forebearers unknown to us. We are a part of the great circle of humanity gathered around the fire, the hearth, the altar. We gather anew this day to celebrate our common heritage here in this place. May we recall in gratitude all that has been given us. So that's a prompting for me to let you know that we're having some glitchy stuff going on up here. The internet on our end or the internet on the internet is main is just being a little bit funky with us, or maybe both, which means we're just going to have to love each other through this hour together. Those of you who are guests and visitors, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Low Country. I always remind us that you have been brought into this place where there is the most kindest, most graceful, and have no idea what's going on. So when you go from here, you will go having giggled and laughed your way through an hour together, and I think that you'll find that amazing. I'm going to take the opportunity, if you guys can talk over this, to introduce yourself if you're a guest or visitor for the first time. So is there anybody that's with us for the first or second time that'd be willing to stand and just introduce yourself? Tell us where you're from.
Hi, I'm Sue Holland, and I'm recently from Florida, but from upstate New York mostly, and I was a member of the Unitarian Universalist Friendship Fellowship Church in Florida.
Wonderful. Welcome. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Excuse me, in the back.
I'm Greg. I'm from Bluffton. I'm from Sun City. And I'm here for the second time.
Very good. Welcome here. Thank you. In front of Greg. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Linda. My husband Roy, and we are visiting here for the first time. We're staying with our friends Lucy and Kim, who have visited us down here several times. And we're from Maryland, and we belong to a new church there, the Sugar Road Congregation.
Yes, ma'am.
Say is that we met about 20 years ago at a UU church in Germantown, Maryland, and we've been UU forever friends.
Wonderful. I love the connections. Yes, sir. If you would please.
Yes, I'm Bob Glenn. We're here with my wife Kathy, and we're from Richmond, Virginia.
Welcome. Good to have you here. Are there others? I would like to tell you that I know what's going to happen here today, but I do not. We're going to have it together, whatever it is. We're going to have it together. A couple announcements I need to make to you, draw your attention to. This congregation is going through the process of renewing our welcoming congregation status. And so there's a book drive that's coming up soon. You'll see that announcement in your bulletin. Please take the opportunity to read through that on the 20th and 27th of this month. And I've also been asked concerning that to ask those of you who would like to come and be a part of that, if you could bring cash so that if you wish to make a donation, that would be helpful for us too. So just take note of that. Where's Kathy? Was that okay?
That's okay.
Oh.
You can bring anything, but cash
Or a check. Okay, all right. Just make that out to Charlie Tyler. I'll make sure it gets to the right place. The other announcement that came to me that I thought was delightful, Lynn Nordenberg's brother, Mark, sent a gift to our congregation on the July 20th birthday of Lynn's 20th birthday. And so that very generous gift came in on your behalf, and we need to thank your family for that. Thank you, man. Gordon made sure that I knew that it was your 20th birthday on July 20th. I want to make sure I cover all my bases. I think now I'm going to turn this over to Dick in some kind of way. I'm just going to step down there to see what's going on. Okay? Thank you.
Good morning. Nice to see all of you, if only on Zoom. It's a rainy day here in Mid-Coast, Maine, but it's a big day for the community. Today is the day of the annual lobster boat races. And if you think that that is for the faint of heart, believe me, it is not for the faint of heart. People take it very, very seriously, and it attracts a crowd of probably 1,000 people, which is an awful lot for being out in the country like this. The opening words this morning come from Reverend Jennifer Grayson, and I have done some adapting of these words. We come together each week, bound not by a creed or a mutual desire to please one God or many gods. We are drawn together by a belief that how we are in the world and who we are together matters. We have joined in lighting our chalice, together in the knowledge that love, not fear, can change this world, if only one small bit at a time. Thank you. Our opening hymn this morning is number 346. Come sing a song with me. Please rise as you're willing and able.
This morning, Reverend Dick Hood is going to talk a bit about ethical statements. And he's been thinking about
those short, brief memes, you know, the ones that we see all the time, especially on social media, and wondering if these simplistic ethical statements might possibly be preventing us from thinking more deeply about more complex ethical situations. For instance, when we say something like, just be nice, Dick wonders if that is enough. Or should we be looking more closely at our behavior? Should we be paying more attention to how we treat the people around us? Well, all of this reminded me of a story that we tell sometimes in the Sunday school. And this story was written by a man from Brazil, and sometimes the kids don't like to hear it.
Thank you.
But we tell it anyway. And this story was written by a man from Brazil. I think he was a math teacher, actually, and he published under the pen name of Malba Tahan. And the story is about two friends named Musa and Javan, who were on a journey, riding their camels through the mountains of Persia. And after a time, they came to a place where the trees gave shade, and there was a stream flowing by a sandy bank. And it was there that the two friends had a discussion, which turned into an argument. Javan grew angry, and for the first time ever, he slapped Musa across the face. And Musa was stunned, and he almost slapped Javan back, but he didn't. He wanted to, but he thought, you know, I cannot be too mad at my friend because I could have done the same thing to him. We are so much alike. I care about him, and I really don't want to fight with him. So instead of slapping him back, Musa walked over to the trees, and he picked up a stick. And with the stick, he wrote in the sand. He wrote, "Today, my best friend slapped me." And then the two friends stood in silence, and they watched as the desert wind came in and blew the words in the sand away. And by the time the writing had disappeared, Javan had said he was sorry, and he and Musa had gotten back on their camels, and they had ridden off to their destination, which was in a distant city. Now, on their trip back through the mountain pass, Musa and Javan stopped again at the same river. And this time, the two friends decided to take a swim. Since their first visit, the rains had come, so the current was stronger, and the river was much deeper. Musa, the friend who had been slapped, stepped into the water first, and right away he slipped on a rock and he was dragged down by the current and he began to drown. And as soon as this happened, without a second thought, Javan jumped in the water and pulled his friend to safety. They sat in silence for some time, and when Musa regained his breath, he stood up and he went over to his saddlebags that were on the camel, and he found his carving knife. And this time he went to a rock that was near the river. And into the rock he carved the words, "Today, my best friend saved me." And finally, after sitting together in silence again, Javan spoke, and he said, "Musa, after I slapped you, you wrote words in sand. And now, after I saved you, you wrote words in stone. Why is this?" And Musa said, "When someone hurts us, we should write it down in sand, so the winds of forgiveness can blow it away. And this way, our hearts will be free from bitterness, and we can renew our friendships. And when someone does something kind for us, we should engrave it in stone and in our hearts, so that this way we will never forget." Javan then thanked Musa and told him he didn't ever want to hurt him again, and the two friends hugged and they continued on their journey. And that's the end. And I'm not sure if or how this story is going to connect with the message that Dick Hood is going to share this morning, but at some level, I think that it might. Our theme for the month is covenant. And in this story, both Musa and Javan were able to look at their own humanness and decide how they wanted to treat each other. And even more than that, they were able to transcend from the injury one received back to a place of love and respect and right relation, which is what being in covenant with someone is really all about. We are the promises we keep, and we are also the vows we break. With wisdom and compassion, may we do our best to appreciate each other's gifts. And with that, I'm going to take the child that's left. We're going to go to the Sunday school. I'll turn this over to Skip. Turn it over.
Thank you for everyone who brought food today for the Sandalwood Food Bank and/or Lefton Self-Help. These are the two food banks that we've been supporting for many years, and your gifts will be received with a lot of gratitude. And speaking of gratitude, we'll now take up the collection for support of this congregation. Thank you. And we'll now have our message from Reverend Dick Hood.
No.
Sorry, Barbara.
This is the time we share our joys and concerns. One of our favorite hymns has the words, "Share the laughter, bear the pain." And that's what we do for each other because we care about each other. This part of the service is not live streamed, and we ask that you make no political statements or announcements. If you have a joy or concern you wish to share, come forward, take a stone from the basket, tell us who you are and your joy or concern, and then put your stone in the curtain. This part of the service is not live streamed. I want to share a great joy. This is my husband's birthday today. He doesn't know this, but I have a large cake that I brought in. I expect all of you to eat and take some home. Okay? It is a joy, and I love it very much. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jan Dunn, and I have a concern that I would like to share with you that I hope everybody can say. Super good thoughts to Denver, Colorado, where our son is. When we first joined back in January, we mentioned that we've been dealing for over a year with a very difficult legal situation where he was attacked in a bar and then beaten. But then when the ambulances came, he resisted, because that is actually frequently what happens after a head injury. And so it ended up being charged with 3 felonies and a misdemeanor because of that. And we've been fighting that for about a year. Matt just had his final sentencing about a week ago, and the attorney was able to reduce it down to just 1 felony, which is actually really, really good. And he has 2 years probation, and then it will be wiped, the record will be wiped clean if he can be okay. So the next 2 years, please send Matt a lot of love in Denver. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Linda, and a couple months ago I told you about a friend of mine whose daughter was shot in the head while she was driving her son to school. Jillian passed away this week. The funeral was yesterday, and I obviously am deeply upset about this, but I did promise the family that I would ask you all to pray for them and send them your best wishes. She lays behind her mom, her dad, her grandparents, 2 sisters, and a 6-year-old son. So please keep her. Thank you.
Morning, I'm Roy. My friend Misty and I were up at O'Dark Under this morning so that we could go and try to catch a glimpse of the Perseids meteor shower. She drove us out to a lovely beach on Hilton Head where we're staying, and there were clouds, but they created a window for us. I think we saw maybe 15 shooting stars between us. And that's a very great joy. And Misty and I know her wife Kim and my wife Linda offer up the divine spirit that offered that to all who suffer and all who grieve.
I'm David. If you don't know me, I'm your congregational administrator, and I have a great joy that we have a new committee that's formed and is looking at redesigning and cleaning up and fixing the foyer. And also, this behind the little glass right here is what we call the quiet room. So if we have screaming children, babies, anything like that, they can go in there and do that. And there was a very large cabinet in there that I took apart last week. So if there's anybody in here who likes to work with wood and needs some plywood, see me after the service. You can take it. If not, we're gonna get rid of it. So if you would like some plywood, see me.
I'm Steve, Mrs. Andrew, and so we have 2 joys. We have a new grandson. One joy, and our second joy is our youngest daughter down there.
Skip and I used to go to that meteor shower, and everyone would lie on them and go, ooh. So now would you join me in reading the affirmation number 471. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human need, to end that all souls shall grow in harmony with one another. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God.
Thank you all. I have a very technical way of shutting my camera off. I put a clean handkerchief over it. I have not joined the computer generation quite yet. I had some heroes when I was a young child, maybe 5, 6, 7. Gabby Hayes, Tex Ritter, Roy Rogers, and of course the most famous Gene Autry. If you don't know who those people are, ask anyone who is collecting Social Security. They'll be able to fill you in on who they are. But I can tell you a little bit that they are heroes of the media presentation of the Wild West and cowboys. And when I was 6 and 7, I was a very proud cowboy. I had my hat, I had the shirt with the fringes on it, and my prized possession was I had a holster belt, and in the holsters, one on each side, were shiny toy pistols. We hadn't quite got to the era yet that it's probably not a good idea to have your children play with guns, because this was a long time ago, a long, long time ago. And I want to talk specifically about a play date that I had, and there's another term. I don't think we had play dates back then, but I remember vaguely that I used to play with Debbie across the street, and I was too young to cross the street by myself, so my mother had to come out and help me across the street. And I was there one day playing, and as we finished our little play date or whatever we did, Debbie reached in to my holster and took one of my toy pistols and ran in her house and shut the door. That I remember vividly. I was angry, I was frustrated, I'm sure I was crying. It was a bad situation and I didn't know how to cope with it. My mother came out of the house and had me cross the street the other side, and I explained all my emotions and what was going on. And my mother's response was, "Oh, just be nice." That didn't help. And I realized as I started reflecting on this story for the sermon today, that my mother said that a few times, that when there were situations that you just didn't really know how to handle them, you didn't know what was right, what was wrong, what was good behavior, what was bad behavior, my mother would say simply, "Oh, just be nice." And I don't want to show any disrespect to my departed mother, but I realized as I grew older that that little sentence just didn't hack it. It just didn't really help me. And in fact, as an extension, all those little mimes that you see on Facebook or that you repeat to one another that try to sum up in some way an ethical situation, a situation where you're not sure how you should treat someone else. All those little phrases are, while pretty, are somewhat meaningless. And really, those little phrases are an excuse not to think about that deeper question: how do we handle other people? What are our responsibilities to treating other people, both locally and even worldwide? Let me give you some of the examples of what I mean by those little phrases that just don't seem to make it anymore. The Old Testament, of course, is in large measure based on the idea of covenant, of God coming down and telling Moses initially about what was good and what was bad, and those little phrases, "Thou shalt not kill," nice little phrase. "Thou shalt not covet." Not covet in the Ten Commandments. It says you can't covet a house. You can't covet a donkey, and worst of all, "Thou shalt not covet someone else's wife." The New Testament also talks about covenant and tries to deal with human relations. And again, some of these short little phrases come about because of translations of Scripture. The major one I thought of immediately was do unto others, which is shorthand for the whole golden rule that Jesus allegedly spoke. And it sounds real good. Oh, yes, do unto others. Well, maybe, but not always. It doesn't really approach the idea that things can be complex and that simple answers are just that, simple. Even the Beatles are guilty of coming up with these short little phrases that don't necessarily help but sound pretty. And I think of that wonderful Beatles tune, All You Need Is Love. That's all, love is all you need. And yeah, that's great, and that's probably right, but it doesn't really address the complexities of situations that we find ourselves in where we're not sure how to treat someone else, or we're not sure about how to react about somebody treating us. Let me digress for a minute to talk about covenants, because you're going to be hearing a lot about that in the coming church year. For us Unitarian Universalists anyway, there are really two different kinds of covenants, and I want to make sure we make a distinction between them. One is simply a statement of common values, common beliefs, that we covenant with each other for that that love is the answer, that we will try to love. That's fine. But there's a second type of covenant that is within our history and in our current denominational practices called the covenant of right relations. And that talks much more specifically to how do you treat other people? How do you handle yourself in a church setting? There are even covenants for ministers about what is proper behavior and what is improper behavior in a church setting. I'll give you a brief example of that. I served for 35 years, very part-time, in the same church. And after 35 years, I decided it was time to retire. I figured I must have said everything that could have been said, preaching for 35 years to one congregation. And so I announced one Sunday that in 3 or 4 months I would be retiring, and that as part of the covenant of right relations within ministers, I would be leaving the church for a minimum of 2 years. And there's good reason for that, because the next minister comes in, needs to establish himself or herself. So that's part of minister covenants. I told them that again in my letter of resignation, and I also mentioned it in the very last sermon I preached. It wasn't more than 6 or 7 weeks later I got a phone call from somebody saying, wait a minute, what happened? I know you retired, but where have you been? The covenant is not always easy, and it's not always understood by other people. But the covenant still is an important part of being a Unitarian Universalist minister. Right relations, a guideline for how to treat ethical situations. Let me give you some idea about what I mean about ethical situations. How do we treat someone who mistreats us, either physically or mentally? The simple answer that has been part of Christian tradition is turn the other cheek. Turn the other cheek. I'm sorry, I just don't believe that's true. And in fact, I think that little line, turn the other cheek, may and well, in the long run, be a bad behavior and not solve any problems, and perhaps makes interrelationship problems even worse. How do we view and respond to evil behavior? How do we respond to people who are within our congregation or in a different mode outside of our congregation, making statements that we consider to be evil. Racism, all kinds of discrimination, all those opinions that you hear people mouth off, sometimes much too frequently. Do we just remain silent? I'm not sure. Do we say something and risk alienating the relationship that we have with that person? That is a complicated ethical situation. I have to admit, I don't do a very good job on this one. I'm usually just quiet because I do understand that people who are spouting that kind of stuff, and I think you all know what I mean, they're not convinced by what another person says to them, even a friend. But nevertheless, where is my responsibility to that person? Do I have a responsibility to attempt to enlighten them, perhaps? And that's a charged word, but I'll use it, enlighten. I'm not sure. But I can say this, that it's a complicated ethical situation. When to speak up, when to be quiet, when to protest abuse, and when to just take it and turn the other cheek. These are not simple issues. These are issues that trouble certainly myself, and I believe a great many other people. I'm the first to admit that I don't have any pat answers for the ethical questions that resolve around how do we treat one another. But I can tell you one thing, that ignoring those issues is probably not healthy and is really very troublesome, and some people are very hurt by just simply not being able to function and make a reply that is satisfying to their own conscience and to their own sense of right and wrong. Life is not simple, and simple little phrases don't necessarily help. I won't leave you, though, with just throwing up our hands and saying, well, we can't figure out ethical situations. I'd leave you with at least some suggestions. And the irony is these suggestions do not come from a religious background. This is not theology. It is not something I read someplace in some religious text. These come from human relations. My wife just turned off the lights. Okay. I don't know if that's symbolic or not. These come from human relations. And as a business person, I was in a job that I had probably 40 people working for me. And I had the right to hire and I had the right to fire. I got in some tough situations. When you're dealing with that many people, you're going to have people who are disgruntled, people who are angry, people who need maybe empathy, but maybe they need to be told what the real world expects of them. I believe that those were some of the ethical situations that I faced as a boss. And I came up with a couple of strategies that I'd like to share with you when a disgruntled employee of one sort or another came to my door and asked, "Can I see you?" And then when they came in and closed the door, I knew, okay, I'm in for it now. Let me finish. I'm sorry, David. I'll put on a dark shirt the next time. I'm almost done. Strategies for how to deal with people who are offending you people who are confronting you, and so forth. The first is this: listen, listen, listen. I'll say it again. Listen, listen, listen. It is best to make sure that before you respond to anything that a person says to you, or that it's an action that's committed against you, that you listen to people, because sometimes if you listen enough, you will find some common ground. If you listen enough, sometimes you'll get the story behind the story. And I think that helps us deal with that question of how do you respond to a certain person. Having said that, I always had the rule of 5 seconds. And the rule of 5 seconds is simply this: when you think you're going to respond to someone in a situation where there are some ethical considerations and you're not sure, don't say anything for 5 seconds. That's what 5 seconds is like. Give yourself some time for your conscience and your good judgment to take hold. Blurting out an answer almost always is wrong. Responding to an angry person with anger is almost always wrong. Responding to an abusive person with empathy is almost always wrong. I guess the point is this: I think my mother was wrong. I don't think that simply being nice to people solves any answers. Life is more complicated than that, and we need to think about our responses. We need to think about how we treat other people, and that there's no firm answer that ever comes, but we need to listen within ourselves to learn as best we can what is right and what is wrong. Thanks a lot.
Our next hymn, hymn 298, will be standing and singing the first 3 verses of this, verses 1, 2, and 3. So if you would please turn with me in your hymnals to hymn 298, and may we stand and sing together, "Wake Now, My Senses." Dick, as always, deeply meaningful words. Thank you for your message today and how we might find how to work with the nuances of this life that we're in. And I appreciate your willingness to share your hearts. And for that message, I am so thankful. May we learn to write in the sand and carve in the stone in appropriate places in our lives. John, always fabulous piece. Love what you do and how you do it. And of course, David, for the work that he does here in this place. There is a talk back for those of you that are guests. I'm going to ask if you'd like to linger for a little while after the service is concluded. We gather back up here, ask questions of our speaker, give insights into the things that we have experienced and been exposed to, and begin to build each other up. And so I'd like to encourage you to stay, if you would please, if you're a guest and have the time. That's one of the ways that you'll get a chance to learn who we really are and how we are with each other. And I think it's pretty spectacular, so I'd encourage you to stay, if you would please. I think that that's all that I wish to say at the moment. I'm going to turn this over, closing remarks, to Dick, if you would please. Maybe. Yes.
Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, Dick.
Our closing words this morning from Reverend Sam Tremblor. Go forth in simplicity. Find and walk the path that leads to compassion and wisdom, that leads to happiness, peace, and ease. Welcome the stranger and open your heart to a world in need of healing. Be courageous before the forces of hate. Hold and embody a vision of the common good that serves all the needs of all people. Amen.
All who are willing, please rise as we extinguish the chalice. While we extinguish this flame, we still carry in our hearts the light of truth, the warmth of community, and our commitment until we are together again.
Okay, how are you? I'm going to see you twice this week for your teeth and for your surgery.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't look forward to either one of them, but